Well, educators at the University of Mississippi are worried that students don't have a firm grasp of basic American history. Watch.
They've been taught in a certain way, and then this is compounded over time so that the teachers themselves are ignorant of what's actually in the founding documents. Many of them haven't read the founding documents without some sort of coaching as to what they mean.
Every year they do a whole bunch of studies and run a whole bunch of surveys, and they find year after year that students' knowledge of American civics and the American kind of historical tradition of liberty and justice is just not something students know very much about.
I think that the American values are enshrined in our Judeo-Christian heritage, in our Western heritage, and both of those are really combined and found in the Declaration of Independence. But unfortunately, most students never read those. They're told what those documents say.
Well, one Ole Miss sophomore and her classmates have made up their minds on issues, but can't explain their reasoning.
I've talked to students outside of class and found that there's a lot of people that agree with me. They just don't really know. They know they disagree, but they don't really fully know why. Or they know they feel uncomfortable with something, but they don't really know why. I think that's because of the lack of education.
Ben, your thoughts on that? And by the way, that as that Chiron said, even some teachers also sort of exhibited a lack of knowledge about it.
And that's really worrying. And I think the first thing to say is I don't think this is the problem with students. I think this is the curriculum. I think the curriculum really needs to be geared at increasing history and looking back into the past. And I think that is essential because if we don't understand the past, we can't understand or improve the present and the future. And I am worried that the curriculum is being sort of decolonized, that so many people are looking back and saying, there are so many faults in the past, let's not talk about it. Let's just talk about wide ideologies instead of the actual facts. And there was a statistic that I was looking at earlier which said 53% of people, of under 18s, they don't know that the Declaration of Independence is about the colonies leaving Britain. But 64% of freedom say, of people that age say that freedom is really at risk. And it's strange to think that more people are concerned about the idea that freedom is at risk, without understanding what they're defending, which freedom they're defending. And that comes from education. You know, you have to understand the past to understand how lucky we are now. And that's why the curriculum has to be changed. It has to be overhauled. And I think it's also a reason we're seeing more homeschooling. We're seeing a push for parents to step in and do it themselves. So there's a problem with the education system. I don't think it's the students. I think it is the curriculum that needs to be overhauled.
And may I ask, obviously it's a different country, and obviously it's the country that the colonies, revolted from, but are you seeing anything similar in the English schools for the kids? Is there a whitewashing of history? Is there an infection of...
Absolutely, and we look at sort of stories from, you look at the British colony, and you look around the world, and schools will only focus on the negatives, on why the British Empire destroyed the world, how people weren't given their freedom. And look, we should learn about both. There were negatives, but there were positives, and that was the course of history. But to whitewash it and to take away all of the negatives just seems that, to me, we're not teaching our children what really happened. We're not teaching them the truth, and that has real effects on the future.
It does. And Kaylee, we've spoken about sort of the inverse, which is the beautiful education of those that are in classical education and homeschooling. And so the disparity is now becoming all the more acute between those kids who have come up through the pandemic in public schools and being either ignored or taught rot, and then those that have been taught to think for themselves.
Yeah, I'm concerned that there isn't an appreciation for our country that's being taught in schools. I'm less concerned with some of these videos we see of like someone being ambushed with a microphone, like, tell me, where's the right to unreasonable search and seizure in the Constitution? Oh, it's the Fourth Amendment, due process, the Fifth. Like, I'm less concerned about the facts, the recall. Maybe your history is a little rusty, fine. If you're in law school, you should absolutely know those things. But my bigger concern is the lack of love and appreciation for the country. You should have a deep-seated understanding about American exceptionalism, what makes this country, in my view, the greatest on earth. A deep-seated understanding of this being the greatest experiment in all of time and the greatest success in all of time, the American experiment. And when I look at some of the polling and I see 31% of Gen Z questions democracy, 10% think political violence is sometimes merited. Those are the trends that concern me. You have to have an appreciation and a love for the country, even if your history may be a little rusty on the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, and to that point, Harris, this weekend at a book signing event for an author, the cover of her book had an American flag on it. And the question was, by the moderator, how did you choose this? Isn't this provocative?
Oh.
And she was like, as an immigrant to this country, I am proud of it. You know, she had to essentially explain and sort of defend. So to Kaylee's point, somehow it's become mainstream in these certain circles and in academia to question patriotism rather than to teach it.
Well, and that's the narrative through which everything flows. So as you look at history, and I always tell young people, be rooted in the permanence of the truth. And history is what it is. Some of it is horrible. Some of it is the best thing on earth that gave birth to our 249-year-old country. Like, you want to know all of it. It takes a certain amount of curiosity to get there. But it's permanent. You can count on it. It happened already. There's a lot to be learned from that. It teaches us so much. And what you're talking about is the pride of country. And that's being lost because people don't know who they are or where they came from. And so it's easy to kind of sway them in one direction or another to try to kind of catch them in the wind, if you will, because they don't feel anchored to the truth. They don't know their own truths.
Yeah.
I think our American education system is failing our children in that regard. When it comes to teaching American civics, American history, they get a failing grade, maybe a D at best. There are some great teachers out there, some schools that do a great job, but overall, not so much. And I think that, to you guys' point, that American civics and history should be taught grades 4th through 12th and taught in a way that's engaging, so the students retain the information, not just rote answers to a test every now and then. And as you all pointed out, there is no place for alternative facts in history. It is what it is.
Yep.
That's
Permanent.
right.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.